Bam! And here we go. We
Hey!
are
Look at us.
live.
Faces for podcasting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Amazing Action Comics the new Amazing Action Comics podcast, where we are all about independent comics. We are actually live now, so this is going to be weird for us because now we have video, and we have to make sure that we follow the podcast guidelines, which is don't show shit that people can't see who are just hearing what's going on, because this is going to be for both. But yeah, now you can see Phil, you can see me, you can see our little backgrounds. This is kind of exciting.
Yeah, I like that music, man. I am pumped. I am ready to play football. Screw reviewing comics. Dude, that music's awesome.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
It only took me like 50 hours to do that intro, so it's all good. All right, guys, welcome to the new Amazing Action Comics podcast, where you can actually see us live. This is actually pretty freaking cool. Yeah, this is our indie comic review. This is episode 100. So we decided to do something different, something brand new for us, but something that's been out probably for like forever, because I think everyone has a video podcast now.
There's some people that just like put their podcasts on YouTube with just like one image, like a static image. You know, they don't actually do the video like we're doing, but it's their podcast on YouTube.
Yeah. And you can just walk away and just put a camera up and be all pretty. But cool. Yeah. So we're excited. We've got a really great episode for you today. We've got some comics that we read for this week, and then we also have our indie movie review for this month. So we're excited about that. But before we dive into there, I did want to show you, because we haven't been able to show you a couple of things that have actually. Oh, did I lose the other one? I think I lost the other one. It's all good, because sometimes you guys think I'm lying, but I'm never lying. I'm only like telling half truths. But here, yeah, this is the final copy of Red Hyena. This is actually her second series. Another mini that came out. This one is called the Heart of Fire, so it kind of has like that Indiana Jones kind of look to it, which is pretty freaking cool. And Julian Derber, who did the art on this, Phil reviewed the first issue, and leaps and bounds. The art is just freaking.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so much more tremendous. Black and white, and the only thing that's red is pretty much anytime she wears red or anything that's red in the comics. So yeah, a little nifty there. And then we have Project Shadowbreed #2, which Phil, you're gonna review next week, right?
Next week, yep.
It's gonna be awesome. We have those already out and available. These are sort of like the most wanted covers. So you have Rockjaw, you have Courtyard, who's sort of like that clowny ass dude, and then you have the punker, who's Eddie Embers, who likes to light fires, which is pretty cool. So those are all available as well. I apologize if you can't see it. You guys got to suck it and get onto the video off of that. So those are available at Amazing Action Comics. So just a quick rundown, right? So Amazing Action Comics, I think, when did we go live? I want to say it's been like 3 or 4 years. So I'm co-founder of Amazing Action Comics with my partner who's up in Michigan, Justin Bartz, and Phil's our resident historian. So he has all
and review monkey.
And review monkey, all of this knowledge. So it's kind of it's a culmination of everything. So we are a small publishing company. We publish our own stuff, and we create our own stuff. So we're just starting to make a move. And then we decided to, about a year or so back, to just start reviewing not only our stuff, but people who wanted to come onto the show. And then there's a whole bunch of indie stuff that's out there that just doesn't get enough love, because everything's for like the big two. That's me putting up quotation marks, the big two. So we figured we would just give some love to the indie peeps out there. So Phil and he came on at about, I want to say episode 30 or 40,
something like that.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah, it was summer. It was a year and a half ago.
Yeah, the sun was shining. The birds were chirping. But yeah, so around 60 episodes ago, Phil came on, and it's just been such a great dynamic to have us both in regards to how we look at the same material from two different perspectives, and it's actually forced us to read things that we normally wouldn't read for the most part. So it's been a great kick. So here we have episode 100. We do have a couple of books for you this week. This is for the week of February 22nd in the year of our Lord 2023. We might as well hop into it, right? Since we've got it. So you read 2 and I read 1. So why don't you kick us off with our first indie comic?
Yes. I am excited about this one. So we've talked about James Tynion before. I think we've reviewed a couple of stuff that he's done. And this is a new thing with Dark Horse Comics, part of his Tiny Onion imprint. And there have been some the ads for these started a while ago. So I've been really amped and waiting for this. James Tynion is a huge conspiracy nut, and he loves, if you've ever read Department of Truth, he kind of loves, government conspiracies, but he also loves paranormal, extraterrestrial, alien stuff. So the promise of this series called Blue Book from Dark Horse Comics is, in the Tiny Onion imprint, is that he is going through the reported cases of UFO abductions and just telling them in comic book form. So I was really excited because I love that kind of stuff. And he starts with really, I think, what is considered the first reported or reported on case of UFO abductions, Betty and Barney Hill, no relation to Betty and Barney Rubble. And in 1961, they were
driving. That was tied in.
Betty and Barney Rub Hill, right? So, so they're driving back. They took a vacation up in Canada. They're driving back to New Hampshire. They see, they see these weird lights following them. They notice then that it becomes sort of a saucer shape with windows that they can see inside, because they stop the car because this thing is really following them. Barney pulls out the binoculars and he looks up and he actually sees these little alien guys in the windows, right? And they did the whole gamut. They have the missing time, they have the ramifications. After reporting the incident, they were both very active in the NAACP, and they the fact that they were an interracial couple, I think, also garnered a lot of attention to them as well. And there was obviously a lot of shade thrown on them, which I think will be kind of covered in the second issue. The first issue is basically the point of brings you to the point of first observing and kind of realizing what's going on. It's written by James Tynion James Tynion the fourth, and the illustration is by Michael Avon Oeming, and it's lettered by Aditya Bidikar. And what's really cool about and Tiny Onion editor is Greg Lockhart. And what's really cool about this is it's a black and white comic with spot color, so you get some blues, some blacks. Nice. And Michael Avon Oeming, one of my absolute favorite artists, worked with Brian Michael Bendis on the great series Powers, has done a bunch of other stuff for the mainstream and whatnot, and really nails it here. He's just he's a pro. He's been doing this for a long time. And James Tynion, who has been doing it not as long, but has really developed as a writer really well. I really like this. I like the pacing of it. I like the setup of it. It's very rare when you're reading a comic that you kind of feel that tension, as if you are there in that car with them. But that comes across really well in this, because it's very, again, you're holding a comic. It's very easy to just look away from the comic oh yeah, I'm not in that situation. But it really did pull me into this. This is one of the variant covers by Jill Thompson. There's a ton of variant covers on this. They probably should have done a Wanted one like yours, but with one of the aliens, that would have been cool. And then there's also a really cool backup story. So there's also in each of these issues, aside from the lead story about true life UFO abductions, there's a True Weird segment. This one's specifically about Coney Island. And basically the turn of the previous century, the late 1800s into the early 1900s. And it really, the main thrust of the story is about this couple specifically famous elephants that have to do with Coney Island history. And I don't want to tell you too much about it, because I really felt, as strong as the lead story was, I was really fascinated by this shorter backup story. It doesn't have as much depth to tell, but it is a really interesting, just sort of a very brief, truncated history of some of the weird stuff that has happened around Coney Island, especially back then. And it's written by Tynion again, but it's illustrated by Klaus Janson, who is one of the best draftsman in the business, really knows how to do that sequential panel layout and keep your eye moving as a reader. And just one of my favorite artists, known mostly for his inking, most famously over Frank Miller, Dark Knight Returns, and I think the Daredevil stuff that Frank penciled. But his art style is just really really detailed, and nice. Just the amount of detail he puts into this is really, really nice. Almost to the fact where I was like, wow, because a lot of times Klaus Jansson's pencils are very sketchy to me. And these were a lot tighter than I had seen them before. So I was really impressed to see what he did. I don't know if it's because it's outside of the superhero genre, and he doesn't have to, because a lot of his line work, gives you that sense of urgency, that sense of rushing, right? Of action and momentum and movement. And I felt like maybe since this was a sort of a quieter tale, he made that choice to really give these nice solid lines.
It's also black and white, right?
It's also black and white as well, and so he, and I think he leans into that. But he does a lot of the cool, like old style Zipatone stuff. A lot of the little dots and stuff, and that gradation and things like that. So he really knocked it out of the park on that 8-pager. That, to me, as much as I really love the lead story, and I can't wait to read more of what he's going to do with this series, that to me was like the icing on the cake. So yeah, Blue Book.
Cool.
Dark Horse Comics, Tiny Onion imprint, James Tynion IV, and Michael Avon Oeming with an assist by Klaus Janson. Check it out.
Nice. Yeah, what's funny is that like the last couple of months, I've noticed a lot more of like black and white comics popping up and being done really, really well. I mean, there's been sort of like the stigma that black and white comics are uncool because, you can make color comics, but black and white done really well. There's an artist out there, first name is Danny. And she does a lot with really awesome stuff with negative space. Mm-hmm. She's done a couple of books. I think one was called Coffin Bound. Was the last thing that I read from her, which was pretty good. But yeah, she's really good with negative space. Similar to like Frank Miller in Sin City. Yep. I mean, that stuff was freaking fantastic because it's, you're working with this space that doesn't have anything in it. And they're just blacking out everything else, but your mind fills in everything, mm-hmm. which is fantastic. So yeah, cool. Check them out. Don't knock them. I mean, we're in the business of black and white comics, so we love that stuff. All right, moving on to our next one. I guess I'll hop onto this one. This one is called Local Man from Image Comics. I was really looking forward to this because it's cool when you can bounce back to the 90s because the 90s had just crap shit stories. I don't care what anybody says because it was just like extreme muscles and all these groups and everybody just fighting and I mean, you really didn't read the comics for the stories. You looked for the art and stuff like that. And that's pretty much when art was at its highest, right? I would say like people were picking up stuff just because of the covers, because of whatever artist was, drawing it.
Well, it certainly was when extraneous belts and pockets were at their highest.
Yes. Everything. Everybody had pockets that they never used or pouches.
Or belts around their leg. Like, yes. What's it holding? It's not holding anything up. It's just a belt around your leg.
No, and I believe Liefeld has a record for how many pouches you could put on somebody. He even has a character called Pouch Man, which is just pouches. It's crazy.
It's a giant pouch with people on it.
That's it. All right, so this was created and written by Tim Seeley and Tony Fleece. The Farmington art is done by Tony Fleece with colors by Brad Simpson. Third gen art is by Tim Seeley with colors by Felipe Sobrero. So basically, there's two different stories that are going on in Local Man. So you have one side, and it's a flip book. So you have sort of like, you have what's currently going on. And then when you flip it, you read about what's happened in the past. So you have sort of like this hero named Crossjack who is moving back home. We don't know what's happened yet, but we know there's shame involved. And we know something bad has happened, and he's moving back home, and his parents are treating him indifferently, like he's done something bad. And it's funny because from the very beginning of the comic, he's at this bus stop trying to get to, I believe it's called Farmington, is it not?
Yeah.
Yes. Which is about 10 miles away from the bus stop that he's at. And this truck pulls up, says, hey, this bus doesn't run here regularly. He says, do you know when it's coming? And the guy says, no, we don't know. He says, do you know when it last came? He said, yeah, 1998. And so we have to assume that we're in current time. So we're assuming that the bus doesn't run anymore. So he says, oh, and then he orders. So the guy he says, aren't you, so-and-so cross-jack? He's like, yeah. And he's like, fuck off. And he drives off. And so he pulls out his phone to call an Uber. And the Uber is the same truck.
Same guy. I love that bit.
Try calling it. Yeah, it's fantastic. And then he just sticks up his middle finger and says, you should out loud. So he has to do a 10-mile run. So listen, the art here is great. It's you're not getting an origin story, but you're getting sort of like what's happening now. So something bad has happened to this, hero who's no longer a hero. And it falls within the Image universe because there's references to Malboja, which is some Spawn, where he saved, people from. And then the mom is like, why can't you join any other team like Cyberforce and Youngbloods?
I'm not even cyber, he says. I like that.
Cyber, yeah. So it does fall within that universe. And I did read the back portion where Tim Seeley writes about his love for sort of like that time. And, at that age, he took like a 15-mile bike ride because he wanted to get Youngblood #1. And when he picked it up and he read it, he's like, yeah, it was okay. But the art was awesome. And, what it filled me up with, and this was really great, because this is, we spoke about this 1,000 times, about, these 6 guys taking off in the big 2 to break off and do what they wanted to do. And when he read Youngblood 1, that's his realization at that age of 15 that, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't have to be somebody else's sandbox, but you literally can do whatever you want. And here we are 30 plus years later, and Image is still, top 3 of we call them independent, but I mean, they're creator owned, so they don't own anything that they publish, which is fantastic. But here 30 years later, and you can still do whatever you want under the Image banner. So yeah, so I really like this story. I mean, there's still a mystery that kind of has me intrigued as to what's happened. And then we have on the flip side, which I really loved, was it's drawn in that 90s, big muscle style. The characters' names are outrageous. The best one that I thought of in that team, because they're called Gen 3, was Softcore. Because it was really close to soft porn, and she was a strip dancer who just got layered in some like impenetrable like skin. So she ended up being called Softcore. It's the beats from the 90s are all in there. The way that it's drawn, the way that it's colored, the way that the dialogue. So the dialogue from one story to the other is completely different. So like the Local Man, where it's happening now to Crossjacks, it's more modernized as far as like the dialogue and storytelling. Where you go back to the 90s, it follows all those same beats. So for me, because I read comics in the 90s, it was like going back in time and really nostalgic. So if you were picking up books in, the 90s, you were 15, 14, 12, whatever it was, this is definitely right up your alley. If you like superhero stuff, but there's sort of like a noir aspect to it as well. There's sort of like this mystery that we don't know what's going on yet. Definitely pick this up, because honestly, it was a lot better than I actually had the right to be. And I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of this. So I don't know what you thought, because you read the same thing, right?
I thought it was great. I agree with a lot of what you said. I just really thought it was a winner all around. I really like Tim Seeley. He's been around for a while. Mm-hmm. We've reviewed a couple stuff by him as well. His most famous thing, of course, is that long-running Hack Slash series. Yep. And Tony Fleecs is a new favorite of mine. He was responsible for that, or partly responsible for Stray Dogs, which was my favorite series of 2021.
Which I read. You know why? Because it's anthropomorphic. But holy shit, I read fucking Good Boy.
But it's not anthropomorphic. They're not talking to people.
Yeah, but they're talking to each other.
Okay, but they're dogs. Dogs bark at each other.
Yeah, but I don't think they understand each other.
But just like,
I really don't. There's no dog language.
And just like AJ says about Aurebesh, in Star Wars, they're translating it for our benefit, right? So you're hearing what they're saying when they bark.
Yes.
Anyway, so I thought.
All right, I have to pull back for a second. We're going to walk on first tangent. First tangent. So what's really great about being on video is now you can see when I roll my eyes at Phil, and I've already rolled them 3 times. Continue.
We got to do the counter. We got to get a little counter going on there.
Yes.
So he played, like Stray Dogs played with a lot of horror movie, tropes like or mystery tropes, but with dogs. And this, I love a good spin on a superhero trope, and I thought this did a great job. One of my favorite type of indie comics we've talked about are just like ordinary people in extraordinary situations. So you kind of have that in the main story, right? You kind of have this guy who used to be a superhero, but now he's just a schlub, and he's going back to his hometown, and everybody hates him. And then like one of his old enemies who he also has connections to back from that old town gives him a hard time, but still in costume and everything, and sets up that mystery really well. And you do get a nice hint as to exactly why he's no longer part of that team. But I really just loved the setup. I loved his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, very Smallville vibes, right? I kind of dug that. Thought the art was great. And I love the flip story that really does, like you said, just brings you right back to that era, where they have these really ridiculous code names, and the looks are, very derivative of sort of what was going on, Marvel into Image in the early days. And it really does play like a classic Lost Image story. So yeah, I love this. I love that turning that superhero trope on its head. And I really Local Man #1. I thought it was a big winner for me. And again, I love the connections to Image Universe. The Malabosia reference was perfect and timely for this week. So I lost your audio. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. No. I hear it clicking when you move.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I think my headphones were doing something. So it's going to be a little bit of a tiny bit.
Ooh, we got tangents and technical difficulties live on video. This is what you came for, folks.
It's the first one. Okay. Yeah. So what I was going to say is, dude, I liked all the backstory ones. Oh, wait. So 2 things. One, the last page of the first story, which is not the 90s story. Did you get that? Oh, you didn't read. Did you ever read Spawn?
It's funny. I have kind of been going back and flipping through some of the early issues. So yes, that is a visual cue.
A visual cue.
Yeah, or an homage. Fine, a complete homage, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. The chains and everything. So, dude, yeah, and it's crazy because that's what we're going to be talking about today, right? Yep. It's just it all falls into thing. But the one that I wanted to say is like, out of all the backstories, or like origins, the one that bothered me the most was Air Raiders. But I just need to read it because it's just so outrageous. So Air Raider was an Air Force pilot shot down by Russian MiGs who survived by fusing himself with his plane.
There's no how. It just, he did it, right? He just did.
Fused. He did. But then his legs have like wings on it. Yeah. It was crazy. It's bonkers. Check it out. Local Man, Image Comics. You guys are going to have a good time. All right, wonderful. All right, moving on to the next one. But before we get there, we're going to introduce him by a round of applause. All right, Phil, next one. What do we have?
We have a lot.
I'm going to play with this all the time.
That's awesome. Oh, man.
All right, one more book.
So this last one I have is from ASYLUM Press. It is the Vampire Macabre Nosferatu special. So this was an interesting thing. This is not the first of these Vampire Macabre specials that they've done. I believe they did one back in Halloween. And what you get are 3 short stories, all pretty much written by Frank Forte. The first story, Nosferazix, Queen of the Vampires, has art by Moramike, colored by Omar Estevez, letter by Adam Willett, edited by Hannah Richards. And then Zephyria the Night Killer is your second story, again written by Frank Forte, art by Edu Mena, and again colors by Omar Estevez, letters Adam Willett, and edits Hannah Richards. And the final one, which I was really looking forward to when I saw his name in the credits, The Crypt. So this has the script by Frank Forte. You do have your colors by Omar Estevez and letters by Frank Forte, but the story and the art is by Tim Vigil. I don't know if you know of Faust, was a big indie comic in the 80s. I think there was even a movie adaptation made. Tim Vigil, that Faust was Tim Vigil's thing, right? And so I was a fan of his art. Faust, very, probably one of the first adult comics that I read, one of the first ones that I was probably too young to read. So to see him do some work, I was very excited for. But I don't know what this book wants to be. Obviously, yes, it wants to be about Dracula's. It's a vampire macabre. It's Nosferatu special. Nosferatu is pretty much German for Dracula. And the 3 stories all feel like they're setting something up. So I don't necessarily feel like I'm coming in on the middle of a story, but it's definitely more introductory. And,
are they connected or are they separate?
They are 3 separate stories too. And your first story about Nosferatu, you basically have a queen of the vampires, and she's got her, little concubine of Dracula ladies, and then some sleazy guy comes in who kind of just is trying to recruit her for this sort of event space that he's running, and there's like this little sexual tension back and forth between them, but she asserts her dominance. Basically, I could turn you into a Dracula or drain you at any time that I want, and so it's, gives you a little The End for Now, and really light on content there. And then Zephyria the Night Killer is sort of like a like a Furiosa vampire. So she's a Dracula, but she's very much like like a Mad Max Furiosa type woman, fighting these bounty hunters pretty much out in the desert. The art on this is really cool. The kills were actually pretty spectacular and bloody, so I really did appreciate that. I thought that was pretty cool. And then the final story, but again, this has sort of like an open ending. So, maybe there's going to be a series along the road. Maybe it's going to be in the next Vampire Macabre special. That's sort of my big misgiving, is there's nothing in this book to indicate that there is more. Right. And then the final story, which is the shortest, about 4 pages, is... I really wanted to like this story. Again, the Tim Vigil art was fantastic. Just to give you a little taste of just that, the lead page is just fantastic on this right there. Yeah. The Crypt, kind of get a little Bram Stoker's Dracula vibe there, little skull on the bottom. Really dig it. Tim Vigil is a great artist. And the setup on the story I was really, really excited about, because it had a cat, and it was this poor little stray cat that goes into a crypt and sees a vampire lady. And the way the narration was done was really cool. It was very, remember Choose Your Own Adventure books? Mm-hmm. And everything was like, you walk into the room and do. So that's the caption. That's the narration. It's somebody telling the cat what it's doing, what it's smelling, what it's seeing. And then it's like, you decide, because you are you no longer have a keeper, that this woman is going to be your keeper. And she's speaking to you, but you don't know what she's saying. You do your cat things to lure her in. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to end the short story with this lady in the crypt turning this cat into a Dracula. That's the coolest thing. A cat Dracula. I was really excited for it. That's not what happens at the end, and I don't want to. So, maybe there's some wiggle room for the cat to still be a Dracula, but otherwise it was a very shocking and jarring ending. So for the shock factor, this book has it all, man. There's some really interesting twists. There's some really shocking violence. There's some really reprehensible characters, and the biggest shock of all is, okay, you're telling us what's next, but what's next?
Right.
So
who's it for?
Who is it for? It is people who really like that deep, dark horror, and don't necessarily, I feel, want to invest in a long form storyline like something like Bloodstained Teeth,
Right.
So it's people who really like that horror art, who kind of like that naughty, Dracula, good girl type art in some cases for the lead story. Again, that last story by Tim Vigil is gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's moody. It's evocative, and it really does have a shocker of an ending, which did kind of grab me by surprise. So I think, yeah, if you really like something that's just dark, violent, twisted, if you love Draculas, have at. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Also, if you just kind of want to cut 3 short tales to just digest, go right ahead. For me, I felt it was a little anemic.
Okay. Funny. Okay. So Vampire Macabre by ASYLUM Press.
You're too kind.
All right, cool. So there you go. You have your 3 books there to choose from this week. Obviously, 2 of them we really enjoyed. Local Man, Blue Book, and then for the vampire fans, Vampire Macabre or Macabre or
Macrame, Vampire Macrame.
Or Bram Strokes. So it's all good. All right, wonderful. Okay, so we started this last month where we decided to say, okay, you know what? There's a whole bunch of independent books out there, but there's been adaptations of a lot of these books. And sometimes people are watching a movie that they didn't even know was a graphic novel originally. So we decided to buckle down and just give ourselves another excuse to watch some more TV. And so we started the indie movie review. So last month we did Judge Dredd. We did both Dredd movies. I watched both. One tormented me while the other one just enthralled me, but tormented me as well because we never got a freaking continuation of that Dredd. We need a Dredd 2 before freaking who was the lead character again?
Carl Urban.
Yes, before he dies or gets too old. I mean, he's nowhere near the death stage, but he's gonna outgrow the character. Oh, we can get an old man Dredd. That'd be okay.
You could, yeah.
That'd be good.
I mean, he can get some mileage out of it. He's got the because again, he does that thing where he kept the helmet on the whole time.
Correct.
He does some tremendous mouth acting, and if he keeps that looking young enough, then I think he's okay.
Yeah, but I don't know how much hopping and rolling he can do these days. Yeah, so we'll see. But all right. So then this month we have what we're finishing off with Spawn.
It's our Spawn extravaganza.
Our Spawn extravaganza. So back in 1990 something, early 90 something, because we go over this all the time, you had pretty much 6 creators who left Marvel and DC due to frustrations of not being able to do what they wanted to do with the characters that they were given. So playing with somebody else's toy box, you got their rules. So you've got Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Mark Silvestri, and who am I missing? There's
Jim
one
Lee.
More. And Jim Lee, yes. How could I forget Jim Lee?
And then Will Spartaccio.
Will Spartaccio just gets an honorary mention. Nobody really knows sort of like that gray area as to why he wasn't around or finished off, because I think he was back home at the time.
When he started, he had to stop Wetworks. He started Wetworks. It came out a couple issues, but then I think there was some illness in his family in the Philippines, and he had to go home and address that, or he got ill, or there was something that kind of waylaid that. But I don't know. I'm a big fan of Will, so I'm always going to put him in as the 7th.
I am too. Yeah, I'll keep it the Fab 7, Super 7. But interestingly enough, what was the first book? Do you remember the first book to come out from Image?
It was Youngblood #1, right?
Youngblood #1, young Robbie Liefeld. Yes. Yep. And then everything else would follow afterwards. And pretty much all the #1 books, for most of the creators, were team books, except for Jim Valentino, which was Shadowhawk.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the other one?
Eric Larson, Savage
Dragon. And then you had Tom McFarlane's Spawn. And he's the only one that I can think of, right, outside of Eric Larson as well, that did not do anything else other than their characters that they created. I mean, McFarlane's just had Spawn the entire time.
He really, Eric had done
recently he bought off Ant.
Right. But he had even done a couple things for like the big 2 during his time with Image as well.
But nothing else that it was his own.
Right. Nothing creator owned. It was like, Superman Savage Dragon thing or some, some odds and ends there. But
But no, not like Liefeld, who had Youngblood, and he had Brigade, Blood Wolf. Right. I mean, all these things, all these different properties that came out. I think he actually had the most. Then there was the whole Wildstorm universe that Jim Lee created.
Yeah.
So it just got bigger and bigger. But all right, so Spawn came out in June 1st of 92. And then about 5 years later, I think 97, 98 is when we got the movie, which is crazy. If you think about it, I mean, Spawn was only coming out once a month. So that's 12 issues, 5 years, that's 60 issues. That's not a lot of issues for a freaking movie, or to get your own movie kind of thing. So we get the movie. So basically, we look at the plot. Oh, hold on, I got to show you. Whether you want to believe it or not, and I'm sorry if you can't see it because you're listening to this, but this is actually the issue that I bought back in 92.
Nice.
I bought this with my own money.
Nice.
$1.95. Canada had to pay $2.35. So some toonies and some loonies. Even though I did get Youngblood, it wasn't my own money, but I had a job when, freaking year later, and I bought it with my own money. I remember walking into the comic book shop. I know exactly which one it was in the city. Just plopped down the money, and I just loved it from the very beginning. All right, so in its basic, synopsis form, you basically have an ex-CIA assassin agent who was killed while performing a mission, and is sent down to the bowels of hell, where he makes a deal with the devil at the time, which is one of the devils. We'll call him Malboja because that's what his name was. I couldn't pronounce that shit for anything. Who wants to be back with his wife, Wanda, and so he makes a deal for his soul. Malboja says, give me your soul, and I'll send you back. But like all devils, they keep their promises in their own unique way. Time passed on Earth, 5 years. Wanda, his wife, had remarried, and she remarried his best friend, which is even more fucked up to the story. And he comes to find out that he's this, incredibly powerful being with a burnt face. And every time he wants to transform into human form, he transforms into this blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy. Now, mind you, Al Simmons was black. So this was crazy because, we look at black superheroes, and I don't want to go off on a tangent in regards to color and all that stuff, but, Black Panther was probably the most famous one up to that point, right? I can't think of anyone else that would pop into existence. And then Todd McFarlane comes along and he creates Al Simmons. But what's crazy is, and I don't know why, I didn't think of him as a black superhero. Because you never really saw him in that form unless you were looking at flashbacks. He was always in that sort of burnt form.
Right. And to Todd's credit, yes, so again, one of the things I love about Spawn is that, yes, that Todd opted to kind of do very much the opposite of what he is, right? So, it's a New York-based black hero, protagonist. And it gets a little weird because Todd's wife is named Wanda, and Todd's best friend himself is named Terry Fitzgerald, which, that's we're gonna put that there. But so the temptation, I think, as a creator is to do kind of a hyper realized version of yourself. And Todd said, no, I'm going to go in this other direction. But to his credit, because that's a little risky, right? Even I think back then, white guy creating a black character,
right?
He didn't make him overly or stereotypically black. He's a guy who happened to be black. And I think that was a great choice on Todd's part because it really, I think, adds to the longevity of the character. That anybody can really be like, Spawn's my guy, I love Spawn, and it doesn't have to be he's my guy because, right? And then the other really cool thing that he did was, Spawn's people that he kind of hangs out with and lives among are the homeless people. Which, a lot of times in comics, homeless people really weren't getting that kind of attention back then. There had been a couple stories where Batman, instead of beating up homeless people, tries to help homeless people. So that was sort of starting in the zeitgeist. But I think to a lot of people, he subconsciously drew attention to a very serious real world issue by using that as the backdrop, by using Rat City as the backdrop for these stories.
Right. Yeah, and so, all right, so then you have your protagonist come back to life. He's in the midst of finding out that his best friend, or actually how much time has passed, and that his best friend is actually married to his wife. You have this culmination of him finding out why he is the way that he is, because MACBRE has, an army to create, and he wants him to be the head of, part of his army in this war against the heavens when Armageddon comes. And then you have sort of like a keeper to spawn or an overseer to make sure that he's moving in the right direction to become a hell spawn, which is that captain that we're talking about. So you have the Violator is there, which is this clown-based character in one form, and then this huge beast in another form. And he's there sort of like to manipulate the behind the scenes to push the anger from Al Simmons out even more so that it becomes his full potential of a hell spawn, and just damns everything to hell. So there's a whole bunch of things that are going against Al to drive him to become more evil. But then there's forces that start to come in to help pull him into the right direction for all this. Now, this comic has been running, I think now, as far as I know, it's the longest independent running comic because it beat out Cerebus, which made it to 300. Before, who was the creator of Cerebus?
Dave Sim.
Dave Sims, correct. Who injured his hand, right? Or he's not drawing anymore. I know
he's not. I think it has more to do with just his state of mind and state of being, rather than any sort of physical ailment. As far as I know, from when Cerebus hit 300 and then everything that happened post 300.
There was no masturbation involved.
I think there's a lot of masturbation involved with Dave Sim. I think that's
yes, but all right. Yeah. So yes, for whatever we know, he's not doing anything. I mean, he's still coming out with Cerebus books, which is crazy. But they're just repetitious images with just a whole bunch of text on it. So as far as we know, Spawn, which is at like 3 going into 330 something now.
Something like that.
The longest independent, with Savage Dragon just creeping behind. It's almost going to hit 300 soon as well, which is crazy because Eric's been on that mission. And the last couple of Savage Dragons were kind of juicy. But yes, so it's still in existence now, and the story's been told. I remember at one point, I got the first 50 issues for sure because I was collecting for quite some time. And then I left the story for a long time because obviously we go to college, we grow up, we do things. And then came back to it probably like mid-250s. So I got a whole bunch of catching up to do in between. I mean, I got the trades and stuff like that. But then it took a really like weird turn in the comics where it became more of a horror book rather than what it started off with, was like sort of like the superhero genre. And I don't know if it was appealing to me at the time. I don't believe it was. I could appreciate what he was doing, and I think if he merged those two worlds together and did it right, it would have been really, really great. But then now it's more recent. It's back to the form that it used to be, which is the way that it was being drawn originally. And I think Todd only did like the first 11 or 12 issues before Greg Capullo took it over and had that long run with it. So it was great. And we got an introduction to a whole bunch of characters from like Overkill. What was the gorilla's name? Cygor. Right. We got Angela from Heaven. And we'll talk about this as well because there was, when we talk about adaptations from comics to movie, some are done really, really well. And there's elements to this movie and even the animation that we went back and took a look at that, came over really well. And there were some things that just it missed the target for me and stuff like that. So let's look at the movie first. So if we look at the movie, which came out in 97, super, super hyped. Saw it at 12 midnight with my brother.
So the midnight show too.
But I will have to say this. I really do like the movie. Outside of the flaws that it has, especially with some of the CGI, because that MACBRE CGI at the very end, oh my God, I just want to puke in my mouth.
It's not even just that, unfortunately, but go on.
I mean, I can live with some of the other stuff, but I mean, like the whole hell scene, and it just looks super, super fake. All right, so you have Michael J. White playing the lead as Al Simmons, and then as Terry Fitzgerald. Hold on, I have the cast here. Do you remember who it was?
DB Sweeney.
Yes.
DB Sweeney.
DB Sweeney. So he's white, not black.
Yes.
In the comics, Terry Fitzgerald is black. Now, I went down a deep hole to figure out why they make certain changes for stuff. And so what I found out is that they wanted to make Terry white because they were afraid to have too many black lead characters for this movie, which was crazy insane. I mean, still 92 or 98.
Because there's only 1.5 black lead characters. There's Al and Wanda. I guess maybe
Correct.
Cyan as well, but that I think
Cyan.
adding one more wouldn't have really swung the pendulum. That was
well, the screen time, right? So the screen time, because and then you had Martin Sheen, who was playing Jason Wynn, and then
growling his way through that movie.
Yes,
growling his way through that.
So much. Todd McFarlane had to have used him as a reference because they were like really close in the comics. And then you have Melinda Clark, who was playing Jessica Priest, who was not a character in the comics because she was playing the role of Chapel because he did not have the rights to that character. That was Rob Liefeld's character from Youngblood. And so they couldn't use it for the movie, so it became...
Who was also black in the comics, Chapel, right?
Correct, black in the comics as well.
That's that's a race and gender change.
But from what I understand, there was a retcon later on to have Jessica Priest be the one that did kill Al Simmons rather than Chapel.
That's right. There was something shortly after the movie that he did in story to make that. Yeah, that's right. I forgot that.
Yeah.
He did that.
So then the whole Chapel thing never happened, and it was Jessica Priest who did it. So blah blah blah. Whatever. Retcons. It's comics. I don't care. All right. So you have your cast. You have your changes. Story wise, I think it followed because it was an origin story. So it pretty much followed that whole scenario of him, him being a CIA, and there was sort of like flashbacks to Jason Wynn setting him up and realizing that it was the Violator that was manipulating Jason Wynn to do these things and promise him some other stuff. Who's played by John Leguizamo.
On Johnny Legs on his knees the whole movie. I love it. I love it. This is what's interesting about the movie, though. It's actually all that setup isn't done in flashback. The movie, you're seeing it kind of happen in real time. So you're right there at the beginning of Al Simmons being set up, Jason Wynn in real time being told by, the clown in the shadows, you're going to kill this guy because of this. Al gets killed. Boom, 5 years later, he wakes up. Merlin comes in and tells him, this is what you are. This is what's going on. And boom. And so, whereas in the comics, he shows up, boom, he's Spawn. You first meet him in the alley as Spawn, if I'm remembering correctly. And then everything else is being filled in for him as it goes.
In the first issue, you get Malboja and everybody.
You're right. Okay.
Yeah. So you do get you get pretty much the movie in the first issue.
Okay.
In that respect, but not the whole Chapel thing because I think that was like issue 3 or whatever it was.
Right.
So
there was more of an extended discovery of how he came to be in that position, at least for Al. Right.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It was like almost immediate.
Interesting.
Like, there was a whole conversation of him happening, not in visuals, but a conversation happening between him and Malboja. But yeah, so when we look at the movie, almost beat for beat, it's there. I mean, you have everything that you need, the ingredients for what you got out of the comics. Outside of the changes, because we didn't get Angela, so we didn't get any of the angel stuff, which is basically angels hunting hellspawns and stuff like that. So you called him Merlin? Was his first name Merlin?
So no, it's Cagliostro, but the actor Nicole Williamson who plays him is Merlin in Excalibur from 1981.
Yes.
And Nicole Williamson as Merlin in Excalibur is Nicole Williamson as Cagliostro in Spawn, essentially.
That's funny. But yeah, so you get him who used to be a hellspawn as well, but was able to sort of like get himself detached from it. Never knew how. I never got that far in a comic if it ever did, get exposed or anything like that. But yeah, so you got the Terry Fitzgerald stuff. You got, Terry Fitzgerald marrying his wife Wanda and then having their kid. And then this whole thing with him finding that out. And then the culmination of, him, that whole alley fight with the Violator, that happened in the book as well. So it was almost beat for beat the same. So there were a lot of elements that were in the book, and I think Todd had his hand in it because he was not. I don't think he was credited as a producer But
it's like in association with Todd McFarlane Entertainment.
Correct.
I think he does have an executive producer or co-producer credit or something. Yeah,
probably. So I think his hands were definitely in it because you can see a lot of the elements just taken and inspired.
He's got a cameo in it too.
When?
Oh, he's one of the guys living in Rat City during the fight with Malebolgia, which starts on the rooftop, and then Spawn gets not Malebolgia, I'm sorry, Violator, when he turns into Violator, and then Spawn gets knocked off the roof of the church or whatever,
right?
And he loses his little mini Uzi, right, his little submachine gun, and then Todd is the one who picks up the machine gun, hands it to Spawn. And then Spawn goes and does some shooting or whatever. And then hears something behind him and turns around and he aims it. It's Todd again. He almost like shot the guy who just gave him the gun, right, to help him out. But yeah, that's Todd. That's Todd. He's got like a couple, 3 shots in there.
I didn't realize that. I have to go back and watch that.
They even made Todd even made an action figure of himself for that.
So there you go. So one of the things that kind of took me out of the movie was Rat City, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that kid did not exist.
Right.
Created for the movies, that whole little relationship with his father, and then him. I don't know why they think it's appealing for men to befriend little kids.
Right.
Fucking creepy as shit. So like the homeless people that he befriends in the comics, that would have been great if they brought that into the movies because they rallied behind him. They protected him. We didn't get any of the Sam Twitch stuff in there as well, which would have been, I think, a really great element if they would have brought that in because there was no real like third-party force like the cops to be involved. It was pretty much just Spawn versus Jason Wynn versus the Violator. So I think storytelling wise, it was pretty much just linear, where there could have been a lot of more texture. Like the comic had a lot of texture because there were a lot of storylines that were happening simultaneously, where they were separate from one another. And then every now and then they would cross and then they would deviate away from each other again. But these worlds were all connected in some way, whether it was like, 2 degrees or 3 degrees. And then it came back and you saw that come in. I think the movie, and it's hard. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I want to see the director's cut because I didn't even know there was one. If that extra 45 minutes gives you a little bit more of that stuff. Yeah. And that. So, yeah, I like the movie. For me, going back to be able to say, okay, you know what? I bought this with my own money. First comic I bought my money. And then to see that, go onto the big screen, I was super excited. They did what they did. It was originally a $20 million budget that turned out to be a $40 to $45 million budget because they didn't realize the CGI was going to be that expensive. And all these ILM guys that broke off from ILM to create their own company to be able to do this. And then ended up making, I think, $85 million. So they doubled their money in that respect. But who knows whether or not they made anything with the marketing and all that. So yeah, for me, it's always going to be one of these movies where I'm just going to gravitate towards back because the nostalgia effect of, being in a comic store and then seeing something that I read go onto screen. Whether it's a true adaptation, obviously it's not because there was a lot of character changes and stuff like that, a little things that they made for the movie. But yeah, I think the story-wise, I think it could have been a lot more well-rounded if you would have brought in these other aspects. But then again, you're looking at running time, right? So you have an origin story, and how much can you get in with, an hour and a half, an hour, 40 minutes?
There's also, I think, there was a sense of let's hold off on some stuff for the sequel because I think they really thought that this was going to get, at least one other movie. You got to look at it. It's funny. You have to look at it in context because 1997, summer of 1997. We talked about the original Judge Dredd movie with Stallone, which was summer of 95. Summer of 95 was the summer of Batman Forever. And Batman Forever really was such a rebirth for a very brief period of time of the Batman franchise because it was designed to really please the general audience after what Batman Returns was, which was really just a Tim Burton movie with bat ears. And, and so in 95, everybody wanted to be in a comic book movie. Everybody wanted to do a superhero movie. And, you allegedly have Schwarzenegger daring Stallone to do Judge Dredd. And that's how we got Judge Dredd. And, and then in 97, that trend is still going. And the anticipation was really there for Batman and Robin. And then it was like Batman and Robin did so bad. And Spawn, coming out the same summer as Batman and Robin, is the anti-Batman and Robin. It is not, as goofy and campy as that. It really does try to play the material straight and has reverence for the source material that Batman and Robin is sorely lacking. But the ripple effect, I think, of Batman and Robin, I think, really put the nail in the coffin for just about any other comic book movie that came out that summer. And I think Spawn really was a victim of that, because it was, Batman and Robin was just universally reviled by just about even people who like Batman Forever were like, this movie's garbage. So it really wouldn't, I think, be until Wesley Snipes' Blade, where people were like, okay, wait, now, maybe there's something here. Maybe, we got the stink of that movie off of us, of Batman and Robin off us. So let's see what we can do. So I really felt Spawn, more than anything else, was sort of a victim of when it came out. I think it was a victim of early CGI. In some respects, Spawn is a movie that's ahead of its time because the CGI that was required to make things like Malebolgia at the end convincing, or even the big fight in hell at the end. My big thing about this movie, and I've seen the movie twice. I saw the movie the night it came out, and then I saw it just a few hours ago. And
the cape also.
And the cape as well. And again, go ahead.
If we look at more recent capes, right, like Superman's cape, Batman's cape in these movies, those don't exist. Those are all CGI'd in.
Yeah.
And they look freaking fantastic.
And there's some weird design choices in this movie that I think also undercut what it was that Todd was doing with the Spawn comic. And again, the cape is one of them. The movie really strives to emulate so much of Todd's narrative style, of his art, his visual narrative style, which again, I think of the 7 Image founders, Todd is the best page layout, sequential artist, bar none. He really, talk about making your eye move across the page and having quiet moments and then big moments and things breaking panels and just, framings. I mean, like Todd McFarlane is a visual comic book master. And I will always give him that. And I think he also writes that way too. He's very much an artist's writer. I find his dialogue to be very clunky and his prose to be a little, but I think his ideas and his knowledge of how to structure a comic book page, hands down, of the Image 7, the best one at that. So again, the movie in a lot of ways, 10 years ahead of its time as far as what it wants to be in the CGI, but anything that's not CGI, as I'm watching this, to me felt like a lot of this felt like a movie from 1987. A lot of the look, the feel, the sort of incidental music, a lot of that to me, I felt like I was watching something, more from the early age, which I kind of liked. I kind of liked how that felt. And then the CGI stuff comes in and it gets a little jarring because it just even doesn't match visually a lot of times. The best, I think, creature effect, the best character visually in that movie is Violator. When first of all, Leguizamo's costume is great and he's fantastic. But yeah, that Violator CGI almost looks like a little bit of a practical as well. I think Violator really works the best in that movie over anything. The cape, some of the green shocking effects and things like that. And there's also, again, but that ends we've talked about this before, man, that scene in hell where it feels like you're watching somebody else play a video game and they won't let you play. It's just exactly it's tough. Correct. It's really tough. And again, you could even say the actual climax of the film where he, the way he does defeat Violator, it's a little goofy. Its imagery is a little goofy, I think. But again, does sort of, I think that is a visual image. I think that Todd had slightly modified later on, because doesn't Spawn himself become like King of Hell and has like a crown kind of thing? I think at some point, or maybe I think it's Thanos or something. I don't know. But I
think it suffers from. I think they bit off more than they can chew at the time, and a lot of it was a time crunch.
Yep, and it's a by the numbers narrative that again takes something that really tried to be unique and different in comics and just tried to make it like every other movie, every other action movie. We got to put the kid in there, we got to have that because we got to bring the kids into the movie,
Right.
And I think it really watered it down. And that's why I think for most recently, Todd for several years now has been saying, well, the next Spawn movie is going to be a straight up horror movie. And we're going to really lean into what we did. There's a really great stuff in that movie that I love. There's some really cool sort of like, I don't know if they're intentional Easter eggs, but I caught them. Like there's this one great moment where Spawn is escaping right from the police. Right. Mm-hmm. And he's wall crawling like Spider-Man, which I thought was so cool. I was like, oh, that's gotta be because, Todd rose to fame on the back of Amazing Spider-Man. And so I was like, that's really neat to see that sort of that wall crawling bit. And then the last shot where you're panning up the buildings until you discover Spawn on the rooftop is Batman 89, is the last shot of Batman 89. And Todd's biggest thing that he did for DC before he went over to Marvel and eventually Image was the back 3 issues of Batman Year 2, which was a very high profile and yielded lots of iconic images, where his cape, for people really were like, whoa, look at that guy. How he draws capes, that Batman work. So I loved those. I thought that was really cool. And I really hope they were intentional. I thought Michael J. White knocked it out of the park. He is so good, and I really wish he had an opportunity to expand on this role. If you've ever seen the Mike Tyson biopic he did, he's really good in that. And again, really also had some fame in 2008 because he was on the receiving end of Heath Ledger's pencil trick in The Dark Knight.
Oh, that's right.
He was gambling.
Not him. It was one of his goons.
It was right. No, you're right. It was one of his goons. He was the one who got the mouth slice.
Yes, the mouth.
That's
thing.
Right. Yeah.
There were straight up shots that were straight out of the comic, which are great. So like when he's like on top of the church with the cross and his cape is just flapping in the wind, straight out of the comics because he drew it. I mean.
There's like that early scene with the clown and Wynn at the very beginning, and I really like because clown is like all in shadow. You just see sort of like his outline, and then there's that shot where Wynn is smoking the cigarette, and the way the smoke curls up against his face. I was like, that's Todd's art. Like that look, that's right there. The other thing I kind of thought undercut the whole proceedings was the intro. The intro felt very and all the voiceover stuff felt very slapped together. That it wasn't. I felt that I don't know. My feeling was that wasn't supposed to be in the movie. You were supposed to discover all of this as you go along. And then again, they were like, "Yeah, we got to dumb this down. We got to just tell people up front, everything that's going on." And then that kind of undercuts the discovery later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think. All right, so overall, I'm still always going to watch it. It's going to be there. I think honestly, for me, what was missing was sort of like what we got out of the comics that made it really well-rounded and meaty were all these other stories that were happening at the same time that affected one way or the other the main character. And we didn't get that from the movie. So the Sam and Twitch, the Angels, overt kill. He didn't even have to be like in the comic overt kill, but there's all these factors that are coming at him without him understanding why. And then he does the discovery through that process because he's an ex-CIA agent to discover boom, his freaking best friend killed him by, somebody's orders. And then he's got this evil clown. And then he's got Merlin also trying to figure out what's going on there. And then he's got angels that are trying to go after him. And then Sam and Twitch bringing in that detective element into it and invading Rat City and then, befriending him eventually down the road. So there could have been a lot more there that just kind of missed, and you sort of got sort of like this. I don't want to say hokey, but it was a really watered down storyline where you know who the bad guys are. You're not gonna root for them, but like in the comics, and it was funny because I was reading a quote from Michael J. White, and what he said that he found really interesting about the character was that he's an ex-CIA assassin. He's a bad guy. He kills people for a living, but he's eventually coming across as somebody who loves somebody so much that he's willing to come back from hell for them. So you see a different side of him.
Yeah.
And that gets to be played with over time in the comics. And it's hard to do that in a 2-hour movie where you take a badass and then sort of like have a soft side for him.
I thought that was actually something the movie does quite well, because he does, before he's killed, he questions the job he is said to do and is saying, I'm not going to do this because you're going to kill 8,000 people. And then the same thing at the end where he has that opportunity to save everybody in the world, right, from the bomb, the H bomb. And then, when Wynn is like, oh, you kill me, then everything's going to go off because of this thing that I had put in me. And Spawn's like, yeah, I'm just going to take that thing out of you so there's no more danger, and could very easily kill him in that moment, but doesn't kill him. It lets him get arrested to pay for his crimes the right way. And so I thought one of the overwhelming things I thought that carried over as far in the movie, as far as Al's character, Al Simmons, I think in the comic and this movie, is a good man who has done bad things. Right. And I felt that was something that was a plus in the movie, that I felt that really did come across in the movie, that Al's a good guy who just has a really bad job and probably the worst boss and coworkers ever. So, to me, I actually appreciated how that was done in the movie, Okay. Yeah. But yeah, not enough mask, not enough cape, not enough chains, Oh,
yeah.
Spawn in that movie without that mask, it's like RoboCop without his mask at the end of RoboCop. I hate that. I need that visor. I need that mask. And I also, part of the other thing with the costume design too, and again, he's got, thick Michael Keaton neck a little bit. And then with all this like texture, that there's some shots when the mask is on, the white is so stark, and then all the bumpy stuff and the thick neck is so weird. He kind of looks like Jason to me with the hockey mask in some of the later Friday the 13th movies. It's just,
neck is his because he's just a big guy.
He's just a big guy. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
I mean, they literally would have to just put like a thin like vinyl suit on him in order for it to not look bulky.
Yeah, and I get like you're trying to sell the idea that this is not a guy in a superhero costume. It is necro flesh. You want it to be textured and feel like it's from hell and all that. But
that would be completely different now. I mean, that would be completely CGI and stuff like that. And would look be awesome. But you know what? For what they did in back in '97, much better than fucking Batman and Robin.
Well, by leaps and bounds. Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, and the other thing too is I felt like, okay, it's been 26 years since I saw this movie. And I thought, well, I think that I probably didn't like the movie that much because I feel like it was largely forgettable. But as I'm watching the movie, I was like, no, this all really stuck with me over a quarter of a decade, or a quarter of a century. Like that means that the movie, as far as its pacing and its beats, it really did its job.
Yeah.
I thought it told the story really well. There's things that are goofy and laughable now when we look at them, or even back then, I guess, in some cases. But I thought it was a really good effort, a really good attempt, and I think all involved should be pleased with what they did.
Especially from if we look at a straight adaptation from comic to screen, I think they did a really good job. It represented what Spawn was, and I think he's in the process, and I know that he's been in the process for like the last decade of trying to get a reboot done. So. Fingers crossed it'll happen before the end of my lifetime. I hope it does happen because I think with everything as far as technology is concerned, I think the fact that he's taken a step back, even in the comics, because he's not writing, he hasn't written for a while. He's done like sort of like plots, but he has all these people that have come on board, and he's trusting these people with his property now to keep the character moving forward. That I think he's not pushing as hard on the movie as well, like him being the director or him being the sole writer. I mean, he's written the scripts, he's put in his pitch to be director previously, but like now that it's hooked up to Blumhouse, I think that he's okay with like stepping back to let his character, breathe new life with another chance. And, with possibly having Jamie Foxx as a lead, I think there's possibility there. Yeah. So we'll see if it does happen.
You know what? It's funny because Jamie Foxx, I think, is older than Michael Jai White, right? Like, or is
I believe so, or around the same age.
Bring Michael back. Bring Michael back, man.
We'll see. I mean, he can still do it. We can still do it. All right, cool. So we spent so much time on the movie. Really quickly on the animation, because I know that you saw a couple of episodes.
Yep.
I went back and actually just watched, because it was 3 seasons on HBO, and holy shit! I mean, the animation is what it should have been, because that was a hard R animation, and that was true to from comic book form to moving comics on the screen. It was great, because we did get Sam and Twitch. We got their whole backstory with the freaking the chief of police and his involvement with the bad guys and stuff like that. The whole Jason Wynn, the Violator stuff, Malboja stuff.
And that the animated show, that's laid out more like a mystery as you're discovering. Yes. That's where I was getting that from restarting the animated series. So, and I like that. I like that idea of you're finding out as he finds out what's going on with him. And visually, that animated series is so good.
Oh, so good, and it still holds up. And for those of you guys that don't know, I mean, there was this whole scene with heaven that happens, and all these angels that come down to get him. And the most infamous one was Angela, and couldn't use that in the movie and in the animation because they no longer had rights to it. I think that was a Neil Gaiman character, right?
Neil Gaiman had created her. Yep. That was part of a deal,
and got sold off to Marvel. So Marvel uses her now. Not as good, but still uses her. And when she came out, because I think she was on the cover of either issue 10 or 11, fucking phenomenal. Just phenomenal the way that it was drawn. And all the angels in heaven are female, which is freaking crazy. So we get, I think, Jade in the animation. I don't think you've gotten that far, but it's at the very end. And she's actually sent to kill him because they're Hellspawn hunters, and ends up falling for him because of who he truly is. Because he's tormented, right? He has to do this thing. I think he's being pulled in that direction, but he's fighting it because of the love that he has for Wanda, and that's keeping him earthbound in regards to his morality and the decisions that he makes. So she ends up crossing sides, and they end up sending angel hunters for her as well. So whatever happens to Jade in the animation is what happens to, I think, Angela in the comics, for the most part, beat for beat. But she was created specifically for the animation because they couldn't use Angela in that sense. So when you get to that part, you're going to see that. So for the most part, that whole storyline, it was good. What I don't like about the animation is it didn't fucking finish. So it ends on a cliffhanger at the end of season 3. And me, who I'm a completionist, you gotta fucking end it, but end it. It just left it open, and I was just like, no! But the animation was great. The openings always killed me because it was sort of like that Tales of the Crypt, but with Todd McFarlane.
So one of the things I love, and this is completely Todd, and Todd's almost ego, right? Because part of what I did to prep for this was I watched the sci-fi short documentary, Todd McFarlane, like hell I won't, eh? And I thought it was a great documentary. It was really cool. You should definitely check it out. You really get an insight into Todd's head, and it tells the story of Todd's career, but it also is telling the story of the lead up to Spawn 300 being printed, right? And I thought that was a really good way to do that. Boy, these openings crack me up because it's this gothic dark room with a sliver of light, like, and there's Todd in a suit, right, drawing with very little to no light. And I'm like, when that came out, when I saw that, I was like, this is going to ruin people's perceptions of how comics are made. First and foremost, like you can have all these guys drawing in dark rooms with very little light, thinking that that's how it's done. And I just thought that was really, really funny. And then, yeah, I like the idea of having him be like a host to the show and introducing each episode. But the aesthetics of it are just, to me, it's laughably 90s, and it's just a little weird. I don't know.
Yeah. But you know what? The animation still holds up to this day. Story holds up. So if you're a fan of Spawn, have not seen it, you've got HBO Max still on there. I would welcome you guys to watch all 3 seasons of that. And go back and watch Spawn and see what you think of it. In this day and age, this is what, almost 30 years later?
26 years, 1997 is 26 years ago. Yeah.
Crazy, bro. Just time flies.
The other thing too is the Spawn animated. A couple people who worked on the Batman animated series, most specifically Eric Radomski, they migrated from Batman to Spawn, and so if you really like that style, but you're like, wow, it's really like a little more kid friendly, like on the Batman stuff, I'd like to see this sort of push the envelope more. Revisit that Spawn animated series, because it is so beautiful. It's so well done. Yes, it doesn't finish, but again,
it doesn't finish.
But besides that, I think it's worth it. I found it very enjoyable to go back and rewatch the ones that I have seen, and I can't wait to get to the ones that I have yet to see. I just think it's a great, beautiful animated effort, and the voice. You can't really go wrong with Keith David as the voice of Spawn.
Oh no,
Goliath on Gargoyles, and tons of other stuff. But I thought his Spawn was so good.
Yeah, but every time I hear his voice, I always think of what is it, Pitch Black?
Pitch Black. Oh,
yeah, Vin Diesel movie.
Right.
He was in that.
Right. The guy's voice has been around forever, and he's been in a bunch of stuff too. I always hear Goliath from Gargoyles whenever I hear his voice. Yes. That's for me. That's the one that I always go to. But I thought he was really good at Spawn. I thought his voice talents are always appreciated.
It was all good. Good. All right, guys, listen. Go back, watch the animation, watch the movie. We highly recommend. It's probably one of the closest adaptations from comic to screen that you'll see. Even in more recent times. All right, so we're going to chat behind the scenes and figure out what we're going to do for next month. If you have any ideas, just, shout it out. Let us know if there's an adaptation of a graphic novel or comic that's made it to screen that you want us to review. And, we'll spend a couple of pennies if we don't own it and review it there. If you like what you see now and you hear, make sure you click subscribe to the podcast, because we will be back watch this. Every 1:30 p.m. live. I know that most of you guys are working because you have lives and you have to put bread on the table, but this is when we can meet. If you want to be part of the podcast as well, you have a project, you're an indie creator and want to promote yourselves, just go to amazingactioncomics.com/podcast. It would have been great if I could put that up on the screen. Such an idiot. Next week. Go there, fill out the form. We'd love to have you on. Chat up your project and what you got going on. Make sure you visit amazingactioncomics.com and stay up to date on everything that we got going on over there, because we do have stuff moving on. Now I'm going to time it, and we're going to see how well Phil does. Please make sure you visit and support your local comic shops, because without them, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today, and you wouldn't be loving what you're loving without their support as well. Phil, where do you get your comics from?
Well, I get my comics at The Joker's Child in Fair Law, New Jersey. And if you love Spawn, or you want to get into Spawn, or you just love Todd McFarlane, come on down, because holy crap, I would probably say about 30% of our store is occupied by something that Todd has had his hand in. So not only do we have Spawn back issues, we have Spawn new issues, all the various flavors of new Spawn comic books, Gunslinger Spawn, King Spawn, Spawn the Scorched. We have trade paperback collections, thin and giant phone book size, so you can really catch up on 300 plus issues of Hell Spawn excitement. Not only that, but Todd McFarlane makes action figures, and we have old Spawn action figures. We have his MLB, NHL, and NBA action figures as well. And he's doing DC Comics action figures as well. So he's got his 7-inch scale of beautiful looking DC action figures, as well as the little 2-3-inch scale page punchers. They come with comic books. So you know what? We have those at the Joker's Child as well. So come on down to the Joker's Child, put money in Todd's pocket, but also, help us eat as well. And really just share the love of comics, share the love of the things that you love, and come on down, give us a high five. Now you'll know who to give the high five to, because now you can see who is who. And
that is number 5. I've rolled my eyes 5 times in the last hour. But yes,
my goal is to make you blind.
Yes, that is all off the cuff, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't make it down to Fairlawn, New Jersey, please visit your local comic shop and show them some love. All right, that is all that we have for you this week, kids. Until next time, please be amazing, stay amazing, and read something amazing. Ooh-wee.